This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
I'm Shini Somara, finding out what comets can reveal about the origins of our universe through an airborne telescope called SOFIA.
And I'm Emma Keeling with a new lighting system that drastically improves the visual conditions in operating theatres, making it safer for patients and staff.
The solar system consists of our star, the Sun, the 8 planets, and everything beyond this bound to it by gravity. It's theorized that at the furthest reaches is the Oort cloud, a huge spherical shell made of icy debris older than the formation of the Sun and planets. It's from here that the rarest comets are thought to originate. When Comet Catalina was first spotted in 2013, astronomers saw an opportunity to gather data on the primordial material that it's made from.
A comet like Catalina that comes from the far nether regions of our solar system, the Oort cloud, it may only pass into the inner part of our solar system once in its entire lifetime, billions and billions of years.
Professor Charles Woodward, or Chick, is from the University of Minnesota's Institute of Astrophysics. And even though he's an astrophysicist, he's also an international expert on instrumentation development and telescope construction. In other words, he wanted to have a really good look at Comet Catalina.
It's a frozen ice ball, if you will, of gas and dust. The dust are little pieces of graphite or carbon. They provide us some clues into the early building blocks that were assembled into planet systems.
Unlike meteors, which are small bits of space debris falling through Earth's atmosphere, comets have fixed orbital periods ranging from several years to several millions of years. As they get closer to the Sun, these icy visitors start to melt. Ice and gases evaporate, releasing dust and other materials forming its tail. Comets with shorter orbits go through this process more often, losing some of the primordial material that they carry. Long-orbit comets like Catalina might pass only once in billions of years, bringing with them a pristine time capsule of the early solar system's composition.
One of the things that we find is in that process of forming a protoplanetary disk in which material aggregates together to form planets, that in the terrestrial zone in our own solar system is devoid of carbon. And so if the interstellar medium has an abundance of carbon in the solid phase, and that is incorporated into a disk out of which planet forms, where does the carbon go in the inner part of our solar system during that process of planet formation? And that's one of the puzzling questions that we're probing right now.
Comet Catalina was studied using the Stratospheric Observatory for Infrared Astronomy, or SOFIA. SOFIA is the third airborne observatory that NASA has funded. Originally a 747 aircraft, its passenger seats were stripped out and a giant infrared telescope was installed. Flying at an altitude of 45,000 feet, it's above 99% of the Earth's infrared blocking atmosphere, allowing astronomers to study the solar system in ways that are not possible from ground-based telescopes.
One of the things that's most interesting when you fly, you're advised to eat a fairly bland meal before you fly because the telescope itself actually controls how the aircraft flies. And so the telescope has the ability to lock on a target in the sky and keep it perfectly centered in the telescope. And the plane itself essentially flies around the telescope. So it's really sort of a combination of engineering and computer science and really modern technology.
Sophia's state-of-the-art telescope is hydraulically and pneumatically isolated from the plane. Light comes in from the top of the telescope and is reflected a number of times, focusing it onto a sensor. A gyroscope stabilizes it to minimize vibrations.
2, 1.
It's amazing to think that the telescope becomes the autopilot.
It's very noticeable. It's equivalent to being on a ship in rough seas. You're trying to hang on as the aircraft is yawing about, but the telescope is perfectly stable. Yeah. Comets, as they come into the inner part of the solar system, are actually illuminated by sunlight. And that's why you see comets have their brilliant tails, because you're looking at scattered light. So it's like looking at a surface of icy water when the sun reflects off of it. You get this brilliant light, but there's also heat coming off from that. And so when you're in the infrared, you can detect that heat because the small little dust particles will absorb the sunlight and then radiate heat. Now, the way that the sensor works, there's a prism-like mechanism in front of it that will take the light and disperse it essentially into the colors of the rainbow. And we can analyze the intensity of those colors as a function of wavelength, and that will give us the spectrum of the object that we're looking at. And that allows us then to deconstruct the material that's responsible for presenting those colors based on the spectra, the fingerprint of light.
The observations showed that Comet Catalina is carbon-rich, suggesting that comets arriving from the outer regions of the solar system, which held a reservoir of carbon, could have been an important source in delivering this essential element that led to life as we know it.
Carbon is extremely important for biology. We are carbon-based life forms, and so carbon is fairly abundant in interstellar space. And the intersection of chemistry and biology, where they meet and how chemistry becomes life, is still a big question. And so comets really are a way to do archaeogeology, in other words, looking at what the conditions were like when we began to form planets. And that's why a comet like Catalina is so significant.
So, as well as confirming that it's carbon-rich, what else have we learned from observing Comet Catalina?
Well, I think it's a story with many pages in the narrative. And every time we get a new comet like Catalina, we can write the next paragraph and advance our understanding of what the narrative arc is. Comets and asteroids are very tied up with how the Earth actually got its water, which is a whole nother story. And one of the nice things about comets is when we look at their spectra, the fingerprint of light, they look very similar to spectra of other star systems that are actually in the process today, we believe, of forming planets. And so maybe this process of forming planets is a regular sort of recipe that's applied over and over again in our galaxy. And we now know there's thousands of exoplanets out there, and some of them have planets that are like the Earth in the habitable zones around those stars. So you can see where this narrative arc is heading. Comets have carbon in them. Comets have organics in them. Maybe the building blocks of life are ubiquitous. We just need to find the right setting on the stove to bring that material to a boil to produce what we want in the end.
You can see more of Razor on our YouTube channel. Search for Razor Science Show and it will take you straight there. Remember to subscribe and hit the bell button for notifications. Last year we showed you a new lighting design based on our circadian rhythms that helped improve people's mental well-being. Now Danish company Chromaviso has come up with a new lighting system that can be used in operating theatres. It not only enhances the images surgeons see on screen, it also improves the energy levels of clinical staff. But before you settle in and watch, I should warn you that if you get squeamish when you see blood, there are a lot of close-ups of surgeries in this film. Torben Hansen is the Chief Technical Officer at Chromaviso. Razor visited Denmark in 2019 to see how their circadian lighting design, which is aligned with our natural sleep-wake cycle, is changing lives for the better in rest homes and helping patients recover in intensive care wards.
We found that patient that was admitted under the circadian light was less depressive, there was reduced fatigue and increased well-being.
Gosh.
And actually also reduced anxiety.
If we find out how the residents liking the light, Inga, can you remember how you felt before with the lights?
Hvordan påvirker det dig?
Det påvirker. Jeg synes, det er godt løs.
Ja.
Jeg har ikke noget at klage over.
Hvordan er humør? Bliver det bedre af det?
Ja, mit humør, det er godt nok.
Ja. She is very happy for the lights. She is always in a good mood.
Now Chromaviso has designed and tested a new ergonomic lighting system for hospital surgeries.
So in general, whenever you talk about ergonomic features, it's about enhancing the work environment. So it's about improving performance at the same time as improving quality and safety.
So how is this lighting system different from the ones we saw in the rest home?
Well, basically, under the hood, it's still pretty much the same bits and pieces. We also use 6 different types of LEDs in order to be able to construct whatever kind of color and spectral composition. But the big difference here is actually in the programming of the luminaire. With ergonomic lighting, we make colored lighting as the general lighting in these operating theaters. Whereas the previous concept that you saw in the nursing homes, that was mainly different colors or different shades of white that we applied there, and not in order to improve work conditions, but that was basically to improve fundamental health conditions there. Well, Emma, let me take you to the showroom where we have a setup.
Torben turns tour guide to lead me through the workshop so we can see the light's different settings that can be changed at each step of a surgery.
Okay, so this is the particular luminaire that we use in the operating theaters. And when we should receive a patient, the light is typically dimmed to a warm and welcoming white light.
But the most interesting and impactful lights are the green behind the screens and the red behind the surgeons. Red and green are used for a number of reasons, but most importantly because they are complementary colours, meaning they are on opposite sides of the colour wheel. If you look at these squares, red and green enhance each other, while red and pink together makes it harder for the eye to focus. In an operating theatre, green behind the screens amplifies the contrast of the reddish tones of the images, which enhances the images on screen and makes it easier for the surgical team to focus for long periods of time.
So when we have a monitor showing an image of a patient's operating wound, obviously that is reddish colors because it images the blood and the organs and flesh. And if you want to enhance contrast and enhance the ability to see that image, you should actually paint the surroundings with the complementary color of those reddish nuances.
The effect complementary colours have on each other is like an optical illusion. Hundreds of years ago, tapestry makers only had limited amounts of colours and used this to great effect. 2 colours will appear different depending on what colour's used and what they're placed next to. This effect is called simultaneous contrast and is more intense with complementary colours.
The surgeon doing this keyhole surgery, they try to recreate the understanding of a 3D environment inside the patient based on that 2D screen image. So it is visually, it's very, very demanding for them to do it and to do it for hours and hours throughout the day. So optimizing on the visual acuity is a huge benefit.
So your eyes and your brain are not having to work as hard as they might have done in an old surgery where there was lots of white light.
Exactly. It's a very complex work environment they have there, and everything that can help them is a huge benefit.
Having the red light behind the surgeon, which is the same colour spectrum as the images on screen, also reduces reflections. And there's yet another benefit.
If you have a room which is monotone, which is green in the whole room, that's not a nice place to stay in for the supporting staff. But if you have the complementary colors represented with green in one side and red in the other side, you build up a balance and you build up a harmony in the room.
Dr. Jesper Adurup, a consulting surgeon at Odense University Hospital, advised the Chromaviso team on what was needed in surgery and has been testing the lights from the beginning. So what do you and your colleagues think of the new lighting?
The overall feeling that this is here to stay, and we actually use it every day since we started in 2005. So we cannot do without it now. And if we turn the light up, the white light up, or if we forget to close it down during the operation, for instance, there will go only a very few minutes before everybody is shouting that we have to change the light to another setting. To work in the correct light, you are more relaxed, your shoulders getting down, and you are more relaxed in the right light conditions.
Chromaviso surveyed 330 users of ergonomic lighting at 30 hospitals in Scandinavia. 89% said the visual conditions were improved for all job functions. 65% weren't as tired, which rose to 85% among surgeons. 75% felt their concentration improved, surgeons even more so. And 68% felt the ergonomic lighting increased safety. The lights are all operated by a computer program and can be changed from a touchscreen. There's even a calming light setting for the patient.
This is the typical user interface used in an operating theatre. As you see now, the light is in preparation, and I can press the button here to change it to patient arrival. The good thing about this also is that it's very flexible, and we can really customize both the procedures, the naming, the icons, everything, the lighting design in each individual luminaire in the complete operating theatre to a specific clinical procedure and even to a specific clinical team as well.
Every one of the surgical team's needs are catered for.
What was important when we built up the lighting in the new operating rooms was that there's different activities going on in the operating room, and each activity should have their own lighting. We actually think that it is more safe to do the operations because you are less stressed and can concentrate on what you are seeing on the monitors inside the patients and not concentrate about reflections and ignoring things around in the room.
The system can also be integrated into the electronic equipment so that when a specific machine is used, the lights will respond accordingly. Torben, it seems you're slowly changing all the lighting systems throughout the hospitals. I mean, we had the intensive care units, now we're in the operating theatres. What's next?
We see two roadmaps ahead of us. One of them is to further develop even more specific lighting protocols for specific diagnoses, such that we can apply lighting as an active part of treatment and recovery of both patients and elderly. And the other is to make it available to a larger group of people, maybe an elderly with a light dementia or a psychiatric patient. We can help them stay at home and stay as fresh as at all possible if we optimize on beneficial lighting patterns for them.
Lighting is something we all take for granted. It's incredible to think that improving our work and well-being could be so easily done with just the push of a button. For more science, behind-the-scenes insights, groundbreaking research, and even some fun, check out our Razor podcast. Search Razor Sounds on all major streaming platforms, and remember to subscribe so you don't miss out on any episodes.
Forests are often described as the lungs of the world, covering approximately 31% of the planet's surface. Sadly, this is rapidly shrinking, with an estimated area the size of Greece being destroyed every year. Monitoring the health of these forests plays a crucial role in protecting them, but the sheer scale presents challenges.
We are working on this project to create drones that can live in forests and sense environmental parameters that can then help in turn to protect the ecosystem, protect the environment.
If a tree falls in a forest and no one hears it, does it actually make a sound? Well, I can't answer that philosophical question, but perhaps Professor Mirko Kovac from Imperial College in London can. He heads up the Aerial Robotics Lab, and they're sending out squads of mini robots to live and collect data in forests. They're sort of robotic researchers.
Like animals live in the forest, the drones or different types of robots could have a symbiotic co-living with the animals, with the trees, with the humans, in a life-supportive and sustainable manner. So not intruding drones that people are afraid of, but rather drones that are fully integrated into the cycle to really support the environment and support the healthy development of those environments.
What kind of data are you hoping to collect?
The data that is very important to collect includes humidity, temperature, light, movement, and the structure of the forest. So this can be done in different methods, and drones today are already used a lot for ecology and forest science. For example, they're used to fly above the forest and detect the different indexes that can give indications of how the forest develops and grows. But this data is often not enough to really validate the models, the climate models, the ecological models, and like this predict the changes in the forest.
The more detailed data is still collected by field researchers, a method which is expensive and sometimes dangerous.
Mostly it's done with people walking around with measure tapes, for example, or climbing up the trees to place sensors and so on. And so the robotics and aerial robotics is a very powerful tool that can be used for those purposes and will be used more and more in the future.
Drones could potentially collect data needed on a scale necessary to track environmental change. They can also get closer to the treetops.
So what is needed are methods that can detect parameters inside of the canopy. So in the dense foliage, close to the tree trunks, in the different levels of the forests. And for that, the technologies are really not existing sufficiently.
A forest environment provides many challenges for aerial robots, but for Professor Kovac's team, that's all part of the fun.
Come on, it's beautiful, beautiful.
It's unpredictable, it's complex in structure, and it's complex because it moves all the time. So we did some trials in the rainforest with our drones, and so if you fly in the middle of the rainforest at 20-meter height or 50-meter height, so like in the middle of the foliage, everything moves, so you don't have a reference point. So you don't have something that you can use as a visual reference point to stabilize the drone in.
The drones gather data which helps them meet the challenges of a shifting environment, building a type of artificial intelligence.
How intelligent are these drones? I mean, could they take over by themselves?
So artificial intelligence is a very interesting term, and it's used a lot. So my toothbrush is artificially intelligent, is written on my toothbrush. So what does it mean? What is really intelligence? And so when I think of intelligence, I refer to it as the lifelike intelligence. Integrating the computation, the perception, the actuation, and the materials and the structures and the chemistry all together. The goal of it is to create artificial animals that would really serve society, serve the world in a sustainable manner.
Your drones seem to be kind of informed by the information around them.
I think a helpful picture in terms of understanding intelligence is the development cycle of a human or an animal or an insect, let's say. So if a human is born, it's developing, right? So the brain is there, the the body is there, the organs are there, the neural system, the muscles are there. So the baby learns to walk as it grows. So it learns the sensory input and to connect it to the actuators. It's an integrated process. It's not like in traditional robotics where we take actuators and control system and this is static, and then we add the learning algorithm on top of it. So lifelike robotics will have to integrate the growing process, self-healing process, and the mechanics with the control systems. And all this needs to be co-evolved. So I think this is what I mean by the physical artificial intelligence.
Professor Kovac's team is working on drones that can place sensors in the tree canopy. One of the ways they do this is by shooting darts into the tree bark.
What kind of limitations or design challenges did you face to be able to launch what seems to be a tiny sort of missile?
Well, I wouldn't call them missiles. I would call them sensors.
These sensors can track ecosystem-wide changes in the forest over time.
The main task is to detect where it needs to shoot the sensors, so it uses some visual 3D mapping capability to do that. It can have an integrated control system that it can shoot those sensors with a certain level of precision to then assure that the sensor is placed where it should be placed.
Power to launch the sensor at a target 3 meters away comes simply from the energy stored in a coiled spring. Another method they use is by perching on what's known as a tensile element, a solution inspired by nature.
So if you imagine a spider, it uses a string to perch down the tree. So we have developed similar methods where trees can deploy string-based structures around trees so they can perch and sustain themselves or support themselves. And like this, they don't need to use a lot of flight energy to remain aloft and sense the environment.
The team plunder many of their design solutions from the animal world, especially from insects who arguably inspire drones more than birds.
So a fly doesn't try to kind of slow down very much and then land like a bird. It's using a very different mechanisms. It basically flies, it does slow down, but it can also crash land into the surface and use its mechanical structures to dampen this impact. So this we call mechanical intelligence or physical artificial intelligence, which is a very important method in nature of how to make animals robust to move in unknown outdoor environments.
Professor Kovac's machines really are amazing, and I can't help but be impressed by the ingenuity of this team of engineers at Imperial. The hope is the drones could soon deploy whole networks of sensors to boost the amount and precision of ecological data to help protect our forests. And the technology has potential in other areas too.
It's not only limited to forests, it's also sensing in urban environments around buildings. It's sensing for offshore infrastructure such as wind turbines. It's also sensing in construction and so on. So it's the same technologies or similar technologies can be applied through a wide variety of impact sectors. And the forest ecology is one of them, but we work and are very active in all the others as well.